Alright, finally, last 10 years later video for March of 2021, even though it's currently April. Again, sorry, got busy, time escaped me, but we made it. So welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And as you can tell from the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2011 Wiz Khalifa record, Rolling Papers. Wiz Khalifa, the Pittsburgh rapper, is someone you guys probably know pretty well. This was his third studio album, and around the time of its release, Wiz was slowly building up the hype around his name. His single Say Yeah was getting a bit of airplay, and then the lead single for this record, Black and Yellow, became an iconic chart-topping hit. That song alone made Wiz someone to watch for, and he would follow it up with another top 10 peaking single in No Sleep. These singles, along with the album hitting #1 on the charts, catapulted him into the mainstream and made him something of a household name. Personally, I haven't had a ton of familiarity with Wiz's music outside of his big hits, though I have enjoyed watching interviews of him because he seems like a chill, likable dude. I was curious and wanted to give the record a shot, even though it's 14 tracks that stretch 57 minutes, which is a bit beefy, but as it turns out, this ended up being just a pretty average collection of pop rap tracks that didn't really stand out as much as I hoped they would. When I'm Gone is a bit of an emotional, introspective opener to the record, what with its long piano intro that sounded like it could have been a runoff of something like Airplanes by B.O.B. It's a nice track though. I think Wiz crafts a pretty good hook that almost sounds reminiscent of something Kid Cudi could make, and while the poppy sound of the song does feel reminiscent of the hip-hop scene at the time, it still works very well. On My Level is a bit of a hazy track where Wiz talks about all of his favorite topics, women, drinking, and weed. It should be said, but Wiz is obviously not a super lyrical rapper. His music is more about creating a vibe, specifically a stoned vibe. With this one though, I'm not too crazy about much other than the beat. The song as a whole is listenable, but just not that exciting, whether it's Wiz or Too Short rapping. Both of them sound fine, it's just that the song isn't terribly interesting. Then of course there's Black and Yellow, which became such an iconic hit song that it's almost become an anthem of Pittsburgh, Wiz's hometown. When I was younger, I didn't really care as much for the song, but yeah, it's definitely a banger. The beat still goes hard 10 years later, and Wiz's flow is pretty cool. And of course, the hook is unforgettable. Regardless of my opinion on this album as a whole, I'm glad I came back to it for this song alone. Roll Up was another I heard in some places when I was younger, mostly because of that intro. For years, I thought I was just imagining that a song with a repeating hook of I Roll Up existed, but it turns out it's been a Wiz Khalifa track all this time. Weird. Either way, this track plays heavily into the pop rap vibes, almost feeling like it tries to implement some R&B sounds. I like the idea of it, and I think there's fun to be had with it, but I think the hook could have just used a bit more of a commanding vocal presence. It's decent, but I'm just not really loving it. Hopes and Dreams is one of those tracks that kind of goes in one ear and out the other. I like the idea of making a cool little strip club anthem, but while the mellow instrumental has some good guitar strums, Wiz's start-stop flow doesn't really grab me, and his vocals on the chorus just aren't all that exciting. And unfortunately, there are quite a few other tracks on here that end up falling into this category of being, at best, average. Wake Up plays on more of those stoned vibes and sees Wiz celebrating his success, but while the hook isn't too bad, the production just doesn't grab me as anything that special. Same goes again with Star of the Show, which kind of creates that spaced out atmosphere with a bit more of a banging instrumental and a decent guest verse from Chevy Woods. Unfortunately, the lyrics can feel a bit repetitive, and it doesn't feel like it's all that special compared to a lot of the pop rap that I've listened to. Get Your Shit is Wiz's attempt at something a bit more emotional, detailing some struggles with an ex-girlfriend, but it's honestly just not all that captivating. The instrumental still has that glossy standard pop rap feel to it that just doesn't grab me, and it's another track that shows how Wiz can be a bit hit or miss with his hooks. From what I've heard though, you might like songs like these if you're under the influence of marijuana. Same goes for a track like Top Floor. I do think the beat is pretty interesting with a bit of an ethereal vibe and some interesting vocal samples in the background. Unfortunately, while it's nice as a vibe, I don't think there's much to the track that's grabbing me or sticking out enough to make me want to come back to it. A lot of the tracks on here, while decent enough, don't paint enough of a picture or craft enough of an atmosphere that makes them worth coming back to. Though there are a few nice cuts, like The Race, which works in some of these celebratory vibes a bit better for me. I like the smoother instrumentals, and this is one of those times where I actually enjoy Wiz's vocals on the chorus. It's a nice little vibe that's got a nice head noddy feel to it, even overcoming its relatively robust length of about 5.5 minutes. No Sleep was another single that charted pretty well, and I can see why. It's a lot more upbeat than some of the other tracks here, playing more into the partying vibes that Wiz tries to handle occasionally. I like the energy of the beat. Wiz's chorus is pretty catchy, and while it's not the most exciting song ever from a lyrical standpoint, it's definitely a solid turn-up jam. Fly Solo was the type of track that excited me when I heard it. It's not like it's vastly different than than a lot of what's on the record, but it seems to lean a bit more into the poppy roots with some acoustic guitars thrown in. I don't know why, but it kind of reminded me of a softer version of a track like Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind, and I was surprised by how well Wiz sounded over an instrumental like this. Rooftops was a track I enjoyed a bit in spite of itself. Once again, it can feel a bit homogenous next to a lot of the other songs, but there are some cool spacey vibes to it that Wiz and guest artist Currency do a good job with, making it a very fun listen. Unfortunately, the closer to the record, Cameras, didn't really grab me as much as I wanted it to. Thematically, I get the purpose of putting the song at the end of the album, and I think it's a pretty decent, almost inspirational track to finish on. Unfortunately, while Wiz flows well and puts together a catchy chorus, I don't really care as much for the production. The instrumental leans into the pop sound, but it comes across as being too loud, almost bordering a bit on being overproduced. And while I'm listening to it, it feels like it's just a bit much. It's definitely far from being a bad track, and there are things I like about it, but as an album closer, I wish I liked it a bit more. And that's kind of the perfect way to sum up how I feel about this album as a whole. I wish I liked it more. While Wiz himself can occasionally come through with a decent flow or performance, he doesn't really have all that much to say on this album, and because of that, I think when you're not a lyrical rapper, it's all about creating an interesting vibe or atmosphere with your music. As it is, Wiz had the right idea for an atmosphere with some nice stoner anthems, but it feels like he doesn't go far enough with that vibe. He's not exactly painting a vivid picture or creating any unique or layered imagery with his production. Instead, it just feels like he's making a very average piece of pop rap that doesn't really go too far or stand out from a lot of the other songs and albums in this style. With this record, I respect his versatility to some degree, but I just feel like there's so much more he could have done, and a lot of his concepts could have been expanded on in a much deeper way. Again, maybe someone will say I'm not getting the vibe because I don't smoke, but what does it say about the music if you need to be high to enjoy it? Back in 2011, I'm not sure how into this record I would have been, given that I was only barely getting into hip-hop and already wasn't too high on Black and Yellow. Listening to it now, I think it's fine, just not stunning. If I had to put it on my scale, it would most likely get an okay from me. There are some enjoyable tracks, but a few too many detours into standard pop rap territory. But that's just my opinion on this record. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in 2011? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it back then, hate it back then? Do you still love it now? Do you still hate it now? Or are you just completely indifferent towards it? Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And if you guys want to support my passion for content creation by subscribing to my OnlyFans, where I create exclusive music review and poetry content for $4.99 a month, the link to that is also in the description. Again, it's no big deal if you can't or don't want to. I totally understand, and I appreciate anyone who's able to. Moving right along, the next album that I'm going to be talking about in 10 Years Later is Ab-Soul's Long-Term Mentality. Again, that video might be up just a little bit later because I'm going to be editing all the videos that I just filmed today and trying to get them up within the next few days. And then there are a couple new albums coming out next week, but regardless, I will try to make sure I have that out as soon as I can, so stay tuned for that. But until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.